I'm Mike Brockman. Welcome to the inaugural episode of a new season of Song and Wine. We're really excited. Some new things for the new season. First of all, we have a wine sponsor. So our wine is now provided for us by Waterfront Wines. Waterfront Wines specializes in products made in accordance with local traditions through sustainable practices. They're awesome. They are in Brooklyn Heights at 1 Brooklyn Bridge Park. And they're right by the waterfront. They're great, they're really helpful, they know everything. It's right off Furman Street. And you should definitely check them out. They've been really gracious to give us our wine for today. This wine is brought to us from Domaine Rollin, a third-generation family estate specializing in organic, viticulture, traditional, and natural winemaking. So this is a really good bottle of wine, a lot better than we did when we were doing it on our own. So we're really excited. I'm joined with Kate Maroney, mezzo, and Sarah Braley, soprano. So welcome. And before we get to it, let's try this wine. I'm really excited. He took it off the top shelf. I was excited. So cheers.
Should we sniff it? See what notes we get.
I'm just drinking it. It's good.
Yeah?
It's a very tasty
wine. Very good.
You can get this at Waterfront Wines. Anyways, so we're going to talk about Henry Purcell and Dowland, not necessarily in that order. So my first question for you is, what are your favorite things about Dowland?
I think a lot of his songs are deceptively simple in texture, but very emotional. And the texts that he chose are really beautiful and evocative and interesting to sing, and which I think is
very emo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. He is
the
the 16th century emo.
Yeah, I guess it's melon.
It's also interesting because at that time there wasn't a distinction between classical and popular music, right?
Mm-hmm.
So his music was popular. I mean, he was writing songs that then people were playing in their homes and everything with a lute or sitar or whatever the instrument that people had.
He's sort of the original singer-songwriter.
Right, singer-songwriter. Yeah.
That's sort of his role.
He also, I think, was inspired by Italian madrigal style a little bit, because there's that Monteverdi, that text painting kind of dissonance that comes in a lot of the songs. So they are really interesting.
So what, as a singer, would you say, what are the challenges, what are the things, or what are the fun things about singing in English, especially this sort of stylized British with ruled R's English?
Well, it almost doesn't seem so immediate as the English that we use to communicate, so it's almost still like singing in a foreign language.
Oh, totally.
Like some of the quartets that we're singing, I've read them and I don't understand them.
Yeah. It almost requires a translation.
Yeah.
Into our. But I think one thing that Dowland and Purcell share is their unbelievable text painting. So it's fun because we even once you sort of figure out what this Old English means, the words themselves are generally familiar enough to us, and so we understand them even more than we would if we were singing in a language that isn't our first language. And the way that they paint those words is so evocative, and it's fun to lean into that and find the drama.
Yeah.
And it's so immediate.
Yeah.
And the music helps bring the text to life in a way that, you're right, even if you don't understand just by reading what the line means, then you're singing it, you're like, oh, of course I know what to happen and hope is.
Any English composer who writes anything vocal has, goes back to two composers, John Dowland and Henry Purcell.
Mm-hmm.
They both sort of invented the way to write for the voice in English. That brings us nicely to my third question, because the first half of the program was John Dowland, and the second half is, well, we're calling it Henry Purcell, but what it really is Benjamin Britten's arrangements of Henry Purcell, which I think is a distinction worth making. I can't decide if what we're doing is Purcell or Britten.
Yeah.
Or both. I mean, to me, it's it's program, because in these arrangements, even though it's sort of the musical ideas are very clearly Purcell's, it's so, the stamp of Britton's voice is just so there. So, so I guess I'm going to ask your opinion, because I don't know. Do you feel like you're singing Purcell, or do you feel like you're singing Britton?
It was a challenge at first, like thinking, how do I sing this? You know, if it were just Purcell, it would be really free and a certain vocal style, less vibrato, maybe a little lighter, sparser sounding, which is not how I would sing Britton.
Right.
I would sing Britton with more, you know, like an operatic, modern vocal technique. And so it's Purcell's vocal line and bass line, but then Britton realized everything. And I go back and forth, honestly. I think it depends on the texture, because I mean that's what Britton has added so much of.
Yeah.
So in some parts of the songs, it very much feels like Purcell, and in other parts, the like especially the rolling arpeggiated stuff that Britton adds feels like it's absolutely Britton. It feels, I mean, it's amazing. It really does change in the middle of the pieces, especially Blessed Virgin's expostulation, which in and of itself is like it's so emotional, and there are so many drastic, quick emotional changes in it, and from the recit to the aria sections. So some of it is very straightforward, and you think like that's absolutely what a lutenist or a harpsichordist would do if they were realizing the figured bass. But then there's some harmonic language that's so dissonant and wild that of course it's only Britton.
And even in somehow in an interesting way, even that choice of when Britton is going to put his stamp on it and when he's going to sort of make it more traditional, it's sort of that's
someone's written a dissertation on that.
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, so there's a book on that somewhere.
That's a choice that Britton is making, of like choosing to let, and so that kind of makes it that big argument that it's really Britton's, because Purcell only comes through as Purcell when Britton gives him permission to.
Yeah.
What's interesting is sort of going back to Dowland and then looking at Purcell and looking at Britton and looking at the similarities between Purcell and Dowland, because Purcell has some songs that are just like strophic, you know, tunes, like singer-songwriter. You kind of like, you could see the influence on the 16th century lute player. And then he has all of these theatrical pieces like Dido and Aeneas and the Fairy Queen, and he had this like theatrical flair and this element. And then Britton clearly seemed to sometimes want to insert even more or kind of augment that or heighten it. And clearly Britton was such a theatrical, opera, brilliant composer, dramatist. So that's kind of interesting, because Dowland, you don't see pieces, they seem all directly like from the singer to the audience, from my soul, and I'm pouring it out to you, even if it was a person, like an emo persona. But then these other Purcell and Britton, there's this element of theatricality and drama.
You're often in these a character. So I think that's a good place to wrap up our conversation. Thanks for joining us. One last plug: September 18th, 7:30, Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church Polydora Ensemble with myself and Dimitri Dover, Yuri Kim at the piano, and the great lutenist Charles Weaver.
And I'm just going to add, the other two members of the Polydora Ensemble
are
also singing are tenor Niels Neubert and baritone Jesse Blumberg.
Yes, how could I forget? They are both great.
They're wonderful,
Cheers.
Thanks for watching.
Cheers. See you on September 18th.
Yes.